Oh, before we move on, I want to go back here. I added another diagram to show you in the prepare folder, kind of show you where JSP code is mapped into the servlet. Not just the servlet, but yeah, well, it's right in the servlet. So when you run your JSP application, it actually runs into this virtual servlet that is provided by Java. Since you don't have one, it's usually run on the servlet. And if you do have a servlet, which you can also build it yourself, then of course you can also do that. But I want to show you here this diagram here. It's kind of small. We can blow it up a little bit. If you click the link here, actually it takes you to another document that has a more clearer images. But I sort of show you here that notice on the right side is the JSP file, okay? And these I have here 3 different types of JSP language constructs that we went over last week. So the first one here is with the pound sign. No, I mean the exclamation mark. This is what's called a declaration, right? So with the declaration, JSP declaration, you can create both variables and functions, okay? And that's the only place you can create functions. So a declaration, if you look at the map here, it's if you create a variable called magic num, then this will be the same as if you would create a variable in the global space, okay, in the class level. Okay, because now, so if you convert this servlet to a JSP page, everything's like mashed together into a single page. So it looks like kind of same space, right? But really, if you were to map it back to a servlet, then things are in different locations, okay? So with the declaration, your variable names are all instance variables, all the class level space. You can create functions as well. And again, function can only be created in class space. You cannot create functions inside another function, right? So that's why it's mapped down to here. As you can see, it's another public method called string, then show it, right? But in the JSP, just all here in the single page. And that's why these tags are really important. Okay, the percent, the @ symbol for directives, the exclamation mark for declaration. Here we have a scriptlet here in the bottom here. These are both scriptlets. And these are the same as if you were to write your code inside a function. So here we have the function called doGet. Okay, so either it's in the doGet or the doPost or the service method. Okay, depending on where it's being called. But so here I declare a variable called string message, type string, and so this is same as you having a local variable inside the function called doGet. Okay, that's one does not have a global scope. What that means is if I were to call this string message inside this function here, it will not work. Okay, it cannot access it. And then of course this is just you have a mix of just plain HTML text plus the expression here. It's a shortcut. If you were to translate this back to JSF, JSP servlet, you will have to print something like this out, right? So kind of show you where things are in respective to the Java servlet. All right. Okay, so that's that. And then now we're going to move on to the next part. But before we go there, I want to introduce one more thing which is not covered in the book. And this is something kind of, well, I wouldn't say it's new, but it's been around for a while. If I can find what that is. Right here. It's called the JSP Expression Language, or EL. Okay, don't confuse this with the JSP expression. It's different. And well, what it is basically just an improvement to the JSP expression. It makes code much simpler. And so if you look at the syntax here, they kind of look very similar. Okay, I also put JSF expression here, which we'll see next week. As you can see, it looks very similar to the JSP EL. It's just the difference is just the pound sign and the dollar sign. That's all. Okay, and then the JSP expression is you have, this kind of angle brackets, dollar. percent equal sign, whereas in the JSPEL you just put the dollar sign and then inside your pair of your curly braces you put your expression. Okay, so this is a much shorter way of coding because, well, I wouldn't say it's not short enough, but it just take you remove some of these tags here. So in your code in your JSP page, you can use either method, and it will still work. Okay, so as you can see here, if you want to, print the student.getName, then you can do that like this, or you can use this method here. Or I didn't put it here, but you can also use the scriptlet. That way, you have to put like out.println, and then inside the paren, student.getName, and so on. Right, just much longer. So it gets shorter and shorter here. Okay, and so next week when we learn JSF, we'll be using a lot of these expressions here, which is also very similar to if you ever get a chance to learn AngularJS, which is JavaScript based. You also see something very similar to the JSPEL here, the dollar sign expression as well. So I thought I just want to point that out, and then we'll put some in the example code today so you can see that it actually does work. All right, so part 2 is focus mainly on the JavaBeans. So JavaBeans is a special class in the Java program that allows you to basically share an object. Okay, and that is a difference here. I put kind of down here in the in yellow here. We'll see in a minute that when you create an instance of a class, right, in your program. So when you create a class called student, and you instantiate an object called student1 or something, then really you instantiate an object, but you don't share that object around. So what you do is you actually share the class. If you create another class, that class can also call the student class and so forth. So you're sharing the classes, but in JSP you actually share the object itself, the instant object, or the instance of the class. And this object here is known as the bean. Okay, and they just happen to call it bean because you want to be consistent with Java. It's coffee bean, right? And they actually have another language called CoffeeScript, which is part of Apple. It's not of Java, but I think it has nothing to do with Java, but it's called CoffeeScript. So much about coffee here. Okay, so what is a Java bean? So Java bean is a specially constructed Java class. Okay, it's also called a component, and that class must meet the following criteria. Mainly these first 3 here. Okay, these are just optional, but mainly these 3 here. So the class must be set to public. You cannot have a private class. Okay. The class must have one public constructor with no arguments. It's just empty constructor, that is a default constructor. But you can also have many other constructors if you need it. Just like your regular class you have been writing in the past. You just have to put the blank constructor there as well. And here is not required, but you should implement the serializable interface. Okay, and then what this is that I mean, we're not going to go into details, but to make a class or a function or object serializable means that how should I explain this? Okay, so when you create an object called student, right, you can have the student has some properties, name, age, ID, and so forth. One student, you can create 100 students object, right, with using an array. Now, remember that when you run your application in Java or JSP, everything is usually stored in memory, in RAM, right? So when you close the application, all the data is gone. Now, and so those objects and those data are actually floating in space. You don't see them. So to make it serializable means you can actually convert all those data in RAM to actual data inside a text file, so you can actually see them. Okay, or you can save it to a database file, and then later on you can also do the reverse. You deserialize it and convert it back to another object, and that object will instantly have all those data pre-populated in use. Okay, so that's what it means to have it serializable. So when you hear the term serializable or serialized, that's what it means. You're converting data in the RAM to actual data in a text file or a storage file. Okay. And there's an example here on the tutorials.point.com. If you go there, I have a kind of nice example to show you what that is. But yeah, so we're not going to cover that. Just want to show you what that is. So this is only used if you want to save those data, okay, from that object. If you don't, then there's no need. The fields and properties are exposed via the getter and setter, right? This is also the accessor and mutator. We've seen it noticed before. So every time you learn before you create an instant field or a property inside the class, you always create the getter and setter to go along with it. Okay, so that it's also recommended if you have them. Yeah, so again, that's optional, but usually that's the standard, that's the convention. You should always do that. So then, JavaBeans components are called beans. Again, just the name beans. Just don't be confused. It's not a really like difficult word. Whoa, what does that mean? So again, just a class that meets certain criteria. Okay, you have done that already. You've used that before. You just don't know it. And when you create a class, you have an empty constructor. You have some fields. That's already a bean. Okay, a Java bean. So now, if you go here, these are the syntax to how you can use that object or that Java bean object in your JSP file. And you'll be using what's called the JSP:\use bean tag or element. Okay, this is called element, just like a HTML element or HTML tag. This is a JSP tag. So there's actually maybe about a dozen of them. You have the Java JSP use bean. You have the get properties, set property. You have a forward, include, and several others. Okay, but to create a bean, you have to use the use bean element, followed by the attribute ID, and you give it a name. So this is the same as saying I'm creating a class called student, whatever it is, and that class is the object name. This is the ID. That's what it's coming to, okay, from. And then the class is equal to the class name. So in this case, it'll be just the class name here, whatever that class is. One thing that is a little bit different here, you don't see in the code here. This line here is the scope. Okay, scope refers to just like a variable scope, right? The visibility of that object. Okay, it has certain scopes. There are four types, and we'll see them in a minute. So here is an example of a bean. And I should say that the reason why they do it this way is versus your usual Java code. You can accomplish both with the JSP in either way. It's just that this part requires a little bit more work, because how do you pass this object to a different page, right? You have to use the session variables or use cookies and so on. But this one here, you just use the same line every page and it just works. Okay. Not only that, if you look at this, it looks very similar to HTML. It's the tag, right? If you think about it, it's just like the HR tag. You give it an ID, you give it a class, you give it a style. So the syntax is very similar to HTML, and that's great because JSP is used to build HTML pages. Okay. And so most web developers, when they see this, they say, okay, this looks very familiar. Okay. And what that means is they don't have to really know Java to write code if they know the syntax to create all these beans. Okay. And sometimes the programmer actually can provide all the code behind the scene, and I just give this to the developers or to the front user, saying, you can use this object here. This is ID. This is the scope, and use those to build your page, without knowing Java code. This is also true for AngularJS, okay, or you will see later on if you go into Angular. Okay, so here again, I'm just going to rewrite this into an actual bean. assuming you have an ID called student1, and the scope is applied to application, this example. I'll go over that in a minute. And this is the class called student. This is just the package name, right? com.gtc package and then the class. Okay. And then, so I'm just breaking down that the B name is this, or the scope is application, and the class is student. And this is just the package name. So when you put this in your code, you don't have to import the class again, because this is already importing the class, okay, to this bean here. So you're not going to do a separate import. You can, but it's used for a different purpose. So you can also have multiple beans on the same page. So notice here I have one for student, have different scope, okay, and it comes from different class. So this student here from the student class, the course comes from course class, faculty from faculty, and so on. They're all on the same page. Okay, and of course, same thing as saying you can instantiate 3 different objects from 3 different classes. Okay? Same thing. And so I just show you here again the syntax will be kind of like this if you were to write in Java code, and they should look very familiar. So once you create an object like this, right, you can now do student.set name. You can assign the course to another variable and so forth. You can do the same thing this way if you create an object this way, or if you're using the bean. Once you create a bean this way, you can access the student object and then use the dot notation. You can get all the methods and all the things inside the student class, just like you would here in a regular, the regular your Java object. Okay, so you get the same stuff there. So again, once again, the difference between a normal class and the bean is that this bean is shared. Okay, it has a certain scope that you can share across multiple pages without having to create sessions or cookies and so on. And it's very, very useful. And so once you have, let's just say you have 3 pages and they all share the same 3 beans here, that means you have to supply these lines 3 times on every page. Okay, so whichever page is called first, and then if this student, for example, is been called on the first page, and if it's already existed because it's already instantiated, you move to the second page and it will have the same code. It will look at this code and say, oh, this is already a bean called student existed, therefore it's not going to instantiate that. Okay, it's just going to use that and move on. Tell the door?
Yeah.
That's like dinosaur or something, right? I don't know. Okay, so let's look at the scope attributes here. As a scope specifies the scope of the bean object. Again, it's just the visibility of that bean. Where is it? Where does it exist? And it's pretty much about its lifespan. Okay. So if you look at this diagram here, it has 4 scope attributes. You have the page, which is on that web page, JSP page. So if you have a bean that set the scope to page, that means that it only exists within that page. If you move it to the next page, then that bean no longer exists there. Even though you have the same name, it will be a new, complete different object. Okay. So if you have data set on that page, if you go to a different page with the same bean name, it would not be able to retrieve the data. Okay, which is completely different. And then we have the request, which is available through a request. Request means, like, for example, if you send a form and the form is a single request. Okay, so that request can be sent over to that page. And then also, if you have, because usually, remember, in JSP, you can actually include other files, right? You can include other files into that that main page, or that whatever the page is. So anything that you include in the files in that page can also have access to that bean if you were to set that to a request scope. Okay, so the scope of a request is visible in also on a page and any other pages that is included or forwarded to those pages. And again, I will demo some of these so you can see how they work. It's much easier to see how they work in code than just look at this diagram and the concept. So by the same token, session here, you can see it can be seen by the request and the page as well, and the application is like it be seen everywhere. Okay, so this is the largest scope. The most visible being is in the application scope. Okay, and this is okay and not okay. So when you code your application, you gotta be careful, because on the application scope, if you do that, then if you have two people viewing the same page, if you make changes to the value, the data, the other person can also be affected. Okay, so if you think about the application scope, it's like you have a static data, right? You have a static data, you have multiple objects, they have access to the same field or same function. And if you make changes to a data, then it's also be seen by others, different people, different browser. So that is why it's not may not be good. It's good if you have, like, for example, a coupon. Let's just say you have a coupon and you have that many people voted for it, and so that number will be seen by everybody, right? So that would be in the application scope. But otherwise, you would not do that. So here, the application scope is bound to the whole application. This means the entire web page, a website. So if you have 100 people viewing the page, they can see it. Any data you put there will be viewed by all those viewers. Okay. So if you think of this like is again a static variable, and you set that by just setting the scope to application. Okay. It's pretty simple like that. The sessions, just like sessions, just any other session you see or use in other languages, and PHP and whatnot. So a session is a user that comes to your site. You set a session, and the session is active until they close the browser. Okay, so if the browser doesn't close, even though you kind of go away from the page, the session is still active. Okay, you have to completely close the browser to kill the session. Because the session is, as you can see, it's available through the browser, and you can see that it can also be propagated to multiple pages. Okay, because if you look at again the diagram, session exists inside the request and also the pages. Okay, multiple pages. Then we have the request. The request is bound to a client's request. Again, like a form, or if do a search or a view on a certain page. Every time you do a refresh, that is a request, right? It's a single request. If you move to a different page, you lost that request. Now you have a new request. Okay, so that is the request when you mean when you say a request. You can include other files, or you can forward. Forward is same thing as saying redirecting a user to a different page. Let's just say if you come to a login to the back end page or the admin page and you're not logged on and to the site, then you should forward that to the login page. Okay, so you can use that in the code. So this is kind of similar to the page, except it propagates to all the include files and all the forward files. Okay, whereas the page does not let you do that. And then finally, the default scope is the page. Okay, this is only visible within that page. If you think of a local variable inside a function, that's what it means. It only exists within that page, within that function. Okay, it does not exist anything anywhere else. Okay, so those are the 4 different scopes that a bean has. It can only be assigned to one. It cannot have page and session. You can't do that. Okay, that's only one. And then we're moving on. How does JSP find an object? So again, by using this ID here, you use the useBean element, give it a name, give the scope and the class. So you need these 3 attributes. Okay. Inside here, as you can see, you have another area. You can actually put some statements in there. this is only runs once. This is usually like a kind of like a fallback content. If you remember in HTML, when you create like videos with HTML5 tags that older browsers do not support, you can put some messages in here, or you can also initialize some other data in here as well. Okay, once you run this once, it will not go back and then re-execute this code. It doesn't do it twice. Okay, I mean this is kind of rarely used, but you can do that. Okay, so this is how you instantiate a bean. Okay, and then now, since this object has been instantiated, you can now set and get those properties, if they have any properties, right? Usually they do, but you can now set and get them. I have some terminologies here. Let me just kind of put this in bold. Okay, so you have a read-write property if it has both the getter and setter method. Some do not have, okay, both. Some, if you only want to allow write privilege, then you only supply the setter. You don't get you don't supply the getter, right? And you make the data feel private or protected, then you cannot directly access the data. So you only you limit this object or this field to be only writable or readable. Okay, if you want to be have both, then you supply both setter and getter. So so you have to read only or write only property. And then this is how you set a property. Once you instantiate, once you create a bean, after you create this bean here, object name, then you can now set the property of that bean. For example, if there's a property called age, right, a field called age, then you can say the property is called age, applies to a bean called bean ID, whatever that is. I want to set the age to 30. Okay, this is similar to saying bean ID dot set age 30, right? Same way. You are using the JSP syntax here versus the scriptlet or the Java code in here. You're just using, this is like HTML tags. Okay. So setting that way, you can also get the property using the JSP colon get property element. So since you are getting the property, you are not supplying the actual value, so there's no value attribute. As you notice here, we have a value to be set to the property called age, right? This is for writing to the property. If you just want to retrieve, then you want to call the get age, right? Then that is just saying get the property, and for this bean, this object, and this is the property you want to get. Okay. You can get the name, then you will say property name. You get the course, which is property is course. And what this does is that it will actually display the data right here wherever you call this line. Okay, this is an output. When you're getting this, you actually display the data there. So in your form, if you have a web page somewhere in the body or something, you want to display the age, then you will put this tag there. If you're using the bean, or you could use the expression like this, right? Either way. But if you have to use the get property, then you do it this way. So this is for displaying. This here again, it's set, so we're not displaying anything. You're just setting the value. Okay, so it just makes sense, right? You're just setting the age here. But here, if you want to display it, get it, then you would assign it to another variable or print it out, right? So notice up here, when you set a property for age, you get a value of 30. I'm just hard coding this in there, but you hard coding the value in there. But you could get this number from another variable name or from a form field, right, or from a data or somewhere else. And so the value in here could be a variable, right? So here I want to show you, this example is that you can do it this way. So let's just say you're reading the data from a form. So request get parameter. And that form has a field named score. So you get the value of that score, and then you assign that to another variable called score here in the code here. And then now you can actually pass this score to the property using values equal to the expression, JSP expression, right? So the code, the score here will be assigned dynamically based on what's input in the form. Okay, so does this make sense? You're just using a variable name instead of the hard coding that number in there. I could, just basically put this whole thing and stick it in here, right? Same thing. Okay, so instead of doing this, there is a quicker way to do just say set the property for the bean ID this. The property is score, and then you just say param. This is another attribute. Param equals score. So usually when you code in your program, you should always have the names of your properties and the parameters with the same name. Okay, so if you have, like, for example, a web form, the form has some, first name, last name, and so on. So the name, you should have it coded so that they match exactly the name of the property in the Java code. Okay, so that way, it saves you a lot of coding. You just say, okay, the score should match the parameter score. So doing all this saves you this whole line of code. Okay, so Java will know that the property has the same name as the parameter. If you have a different name, it doesn't work. Okay, it just have to be the same name. So that's very helpful. If you have like another property, for example, instead of score, if I have like maybe grade, then I'm expecting I should have another variable called grade. Okay, so they have the same name, and you have to think about how. But when you code it, you make sure they stick that way. Here is another way of setting your variables. So for example, here I have two, right? Maybe if I add another one here, oops, another one here, I might have, this is like maybe school, right? School name. So if I have like 10 fields, I have to do this 10 times. So instead of doing that, they have another shortcut for you to just basically say, do that. Oh. And this line means set all the properties wherever they are and match them to their actual parameter. Okay, so these three lines of code here can be shortened to that's this single line here. And the server will know that, okay, for every property, I'm going to match it with the parameter, the same name. Okay, and all of them. So this is a wildcard, and that will set all the properties for you. One line of code. Very, very simple, very short. Again, this only works if you have the same property name as your field names in the form. Okay? So just some shortcut. And this part here, we will explore this next week. But JSP, you can also use it to perform or structure this MVC architectural framework. Okay, we will explore this more next week. But basically, MVC stands for Model View Controller, and so you have the servlet, which is the Java code. That is your controller. Controller means is where all your functions, all your methods, all the business logic live. So mainly your functions and methods, all the things happening behind the scene. Okay, the view is your actual HTML file, JSP file. That is the visible page that is seen by the user. So whatever page you go to, you see that is the view. Okay, so you separate that into a separate component, and then the data or the model is the data. and this is usually stored by the bean, which is that object itself. So when you submit a form, the form has all those, so that form is on the JSP page, which is on the view. You click on that submit form, that form will go to a servlet, right? And then also that servlet will perform all the business logic, process the data or whatnot. But those data are actually being stored in the bean, and so you can see that they are separating these three different components into their separate entities. And this is another term, we call this the separation of concerns, okay, or SOC. You will hear that term in MVC because you're separating each component, each function into their own areas, so you have better control of those code. Okay. We'll see. I don't think I have time to do this example, but we'll see if I can maybe do this a little bit next week with JSP. If not, we'll again cover this in JSF. All right. So this is pretty much what this part 2 is about. And then, are there any questions so far? I know I kind of went pretty fast, but these are kind of like the boring stuff, just the concept, right? So once you understand the concept, then the next thing is you need to do it, right, hands-on, so you get the feel of how they work. Okay, and so let's go ahead and build our next JSP project using the beans. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that.